In 2006, the U.S. forces arrested the young man in the picture before you and placed him in Camp Bakka in Basra province, southern Iraq. For those who don't know it, Camp Bakka housed tens of thousands of mujahideen who were flocking to Iraq in order to join the Islamic resistance there against the American military occupation. With the help of Iraqi informants who betrayed their religion and country, the Americans were arresting any person coming from abroad to fight them and imprisoned them unjustly. Once the detention facility became overcrowded, the Americans decided to reduce the numbers of detainees by releasing only Iraqis who were native to the country of Iraq. Their release was conditional on them undergoing thorough interviews conducted in the presence of Iraqi officials who would determine based on their dialect whether they were truly Iraqis or foreign fighters coming to join the war. At that time, this young man was known among the detainees for teaching them classical Arabic. So the Americans brought him in for an interview and he spoke to them in an Iraqi dialect so convincingly that even the Iraqis themselves were convinced that he was Iraqi. Following the interview, the Americans themselves released the man on whom they would later place a $10 million bounty awarded to anyone who would inform on him. Abu Muhammad al-Golani, also known as Ahmed Al-Sharaa, the man who transformed himself from this appearance to this appearance in just a few months. So who is the man who caught the attention of both the Arab and international audience? And how did he become the #1 figure in Syria? And here we need to go back in time, but not too far ago, to the town of Fik, overlooking the beautiful Lake Tiberias in the Syrian Golani. There we find Mr. Hussein Ali Mohammed Khaled Al-Sharaa, a true believer in Abdel Nasser's pan-Arabism. Abdel Nasser indeed successfully formed the political union of Egypt and Syria in 1958. Those dreams were unfortunately completely shattered when Syria declared its separation from the union following a military coup in 1961. Mr. Hussein joined peaceful protests against the secession along with some students, but they were all unjustly arrested for a few days before being released. A few years later, the Naksa, the setback, happened in 1967 when the Zionists occupied the Syrian Golan Heights and completely destroyed the town of Fik. However, by that time, Mr. Hussein had already left Syria and moved to Jordan. He studied economics and political sciences in Jordan before finally moving to Saudi Arabia in 1979. Our Arab nationalist and Nasserist had no idea that during his time in Riyadh, Allah Almighty would bless him with a child named Ahmed in 1982. And that this same child would have a completely different orientation. In fact, he had no idea that his name would be mentioned in 2024 because of his son, Ahmed Hussein Ali Mohammed Khaled Al-Sharaa. Ahmed Al-Sharaa was born in Riyadh in 1982 in a conservative Islamic environment that called for jihad in Afghanistan. This ideology was promoted by King Fahd, who had received American orders to support the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union, America's #1 enemy. Back then, the current King Salman was collecting donations for the Mujahideen, and the word Mujahideen was neither shameful nor forbidden at all like it is now. On the contrary, it was a highly honorable term that was commonly written in newspapers. And in 1989, Mr. Hussein decided to return to Syria. At that time, his son Ahmed was just about 7 years old. They settled in the Al-Madza district in the capital Damascus. In addition to his work in economics and petroleum, Ahmad's father had also opened a small, modest grocery store where his son Ahmed used to work. And it so happened that the store was close to Al-Shafi'i Mosque. So Ahmed was known to spend most of his time between the store, his home, and the mosque. Then in 2000, the second Palestinian Intifada began, deeply affecting Ahmed, an 18-year-old young man. So he wondered, where do we stand in relation to our faith when our blood is being shed? The Zionists who are slaughtering Palestinians on television are the very ones who had occupied my hometown Fik in the Syrian Golan Heights. Ahmed was at the time a student in the Faculty of Media at Damascus University. And in 2001, the United States invaded Iraq in the infamous war that we all know of. This succession of events led Ahmed to decide to leave university, regardless of what it meant for his future, and set out to defend Islam and Muslims against the invaders on Iraqi soil. He joined an Islamic group called Jamaat Ahl al-Sunnah, which later merged with Jamaat al-Tawheed wal-Jihad. This group eventually pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda under the leadership of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. However, none of these affiliations really concerned him. What occupied his mind was fighting the invaders, regardless of their name, location, or who he was fighting alongside and with what weapon. None of that mattered to him. After Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was targeted in the infamous American airstrike in 2006, Al-Sharaa left Iraq and returned to Syria for a few months. Then, he decided to go back to Iraq to continue what he had started. The reasons why he returned to Syria and then went back to Iraq are not entirely clear, but what matters is that he returned to Iraq in 2006 and was arrested there. The Americans then released him in 2008 after 2 years of detention. After Ahmed's release, the name Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi had started to emerge, and Ahmed actually fought in their ranks for a period. This is when he adopted his nom de guerre of Abu Muhammad al-Golani in reference to his hometown, the Golani. And this is quite typical amongst people who came for jihad. They would name themselves after their cities and countries, such as Abu Suhaib al-Masri, Ammar al-Pakistani, and Abu Huzaifa al-Libi, among others. And yes, you heard me right. Ahmed fought alongside Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State organization, which later became ISIS. Abu Muhammad al-Golani fought in their ranks until he eventually became the head of operations in Nineveh province. However, in 2013, the Islamic State issued a statement declaring Abu Muhammad al-Golani, or Ahmed Al-Sharaa as he is known today, as an apostate. This was because in 2011, when the Syrian revolution began, Ahmed Al-Sharaa returned to his home country of Syria and decided to contribute to its liberation. The Islamic State initially contributed to this by providing fighters, combatants, and resources in 2012 until the formation of the Jabhat al-Nusra entity led by Abu Muhammad al-Golani. At that time, the United States designated Jabhat al-Nusra as a terrorist organization in 2013 and also placed Abu Muhammad al-Golani on the list of international terrorists, offering a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. And by the way, the $10 million reward for information on the whereabouts of Abu Muhammad al-Golani was recently cancelled. When the Islamic State organization wanted to merge Jabhat al-Nusra after it had become known as the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, al-Golani refused and declared his allegiance to Al-Qaeda, which was led at that time by Ayman al-Zawahiri. However, he also emphasized that Jabhat al-Nusra was an independent Syrian entity, ideologically affiliated to Al-Qaeda, yes, but with different goals and strategies. Following his statement, Jabhat al-Nusra clashed with the Islamic State organization, which led to some conflicts between the two entities. Syria at the time had numerous armed factions, and various battles took place amongst these armed groups. There are numerous stories that could be told about this period, and countless of them could be discussed in detail, but now is not the time. We might discuss them later. Anyway, in 2015, Al Jazeera broadcasted an interview with al-Golani, who had not yet revealed his face to the public. In the interview, he stated candidly, "I am not here to fight the West or their allies. I am here to fight against al-Assad regime, Hezbollah, as well as Iran and ISIS." He also mentioned in a determined manner during the same interview his continued and unwavering allegiance to Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of Al-Qaeda. However, on July 28, 2016, al-Golani announced indirectly and in a rather diplomatic manner his separation from Al-Qaeda. He even changed the name of Jabhat al-Nusra to Jabhat Fath al-Sham. And in the following year, on January 28, 2017, he announced the dissolution of Jabhat Fath al-Sham and its merger into a larger Syrian entity, which is the currently existing Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And keep in mind, these changes weren't just in names and titles. Al-Golani has also started opening up to the people around him in significant and impactful ways. He engaged in dialogue with them and incorporated their feedback to foster a sense of community. The rhetoric started becoming more civil as new universities were established and cohorts graduated. The concept of a state started to emerge, and Idlib at this stage was practically a small, semi-independent state positioned between al-Assad's regime and Turkey. Amid all this, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham was actively engaged in training and preparation following major consecutive setbacks, especially the loss of Aleppo in 2016. Hezbollah, Iran, Syria's Bashar, and Russia's Putin Palestine continued their attacks and bombardment on the last strongholds in Idlib up until 2024. Then, my brother, came the golden opportunity. The opportunity that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham was readying itself for all these years. They set aside all the disputes and brought together all armed factions under one unified banner. Meanwhile, the conflict between Hezbollah and the Zionists escalated while Russia was engaged in a war with Ukraine. Bashar stood exposed and vulnerable because all his allies were not available to cover him. The Syrian army had become nothing more than a group of mercenaries without ideology. They cared only about the salary they received at the beginning of each month. And so my friend Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, under the leadership of Abu Muhammad al-Golani, alongside with all armed factions, launched the battle of deterring the aggression on November 27, 2024. What initially seemed to everyone as just a defensive response to the attacks by Hezbollah, Iran and Syria on Idlib against all odds, this unexpected response soon turned into an offensive attack. Aleppo was liberated first and then Hama after it. Then they reached Damascus after Dara and Homskir, and suddenly Bashar fled and it was all over. Glory be to you, Allah. Syria had completely became under their control in an unexpected turn of event that surprised everyone. No one understood what was happening. I believe that neither al-Golani nor the factions with him initially intended to take over all of Syria at that moment, nor did they even expect it. But when God wills, O believer, it happens. And with this victory, the nom de guerre Abu Muhammad al-Golani becomes a thing of the past, and the man returns to the civilian identity he had when he left Syria in 2001. Along with that, he reclaims his real name, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, the name that he is presented with by international news agencies that have come all the way to interview the victorious leader. What stands out is that most of the questions were about whether he will force women to wear the hijab or put a ban on alcohol. The same ridiculous questions that the Egyptian media asked Hazem Salah Abu Ismail 10 years ago. However, what is also notable is that his responses were just as wise, neither contradicting Islamic law nor putting him in a religiously precarious position. To tell you from my personal and extensive reading of these events, the Islamic experience is slowly and steadily maturing over time, and leaders are learning valuable lessons from past experiences. This is indeed a very promising sign, inshallah. But be careful. No one should think that things will be that effortless and will pass seamlessly like a knife through butter. No, they're now facing Syrian secularists who are absolutely against beards and traditional attire, even after Ahmed and his office started wearing suits and ties. These are the same secularists who, just a few weeks before the liberation of Syria, were supporting Bashar and praising him day and night despite being secular. But today, suddenly, they have become part of the revolution and have gained influence. There is also the UAE and Saudi Arabia opposing any Islamic experiment or any form of freedom in the Arab region. You also have the international community. Don't be deceived by their sweet and reassuring statements, because they are secretly working to find any loophole to undermine any Islamic presence. Zoe here, the host, is asking them, are you planning to become another Afghanistan? Even though the same reporter is aware that this is what the dollar's value has looked like since the Taliban took over in 2021. As you can see in the chart, the dollar has declined against the Afghan currency, which was followed by a drop in all prices. This information is taken from different online sources and not from someone making things up like they do. Additionally, the Afghan government is paying off debts and recovering from past accumulations left by previous wars and conflicts. The media won't tell you about a single successful Islamic experience for a simple reason. Because if even one such experience succeeds, you, the people, will stop and think, well, by Allah, why not? And you will also reflect on the experience of Al-Sharaa and the Taliban, which is, between quotes, jihad. You might even realize that whoever adheres to it is honored, and whoever abandons it is humiliated, and their dignity and land disgraced. You will recall the words of Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, when he said, "We were the most humiliated of people, and Allah honored us through Islam. So no matter how much we seek honor through anything other than what Allah has honored us with, He will humiliate us." That's the end of the story, my brother, but the conflict is not over yet. We still look to the experience of Al-Sharaa in Syria, and we ask Allah Almighty to grant it success, because if it succeeds, it will have far-reaching consequences. And if this episode reaches you in Syria, then on my behalf and on behalf of all Arab nations, please be very careful and cautious, and most importantly, please make this experience a success. By Allah and for the sake of Allah and with the help of Allah, be successful! Because behind you are the youth of a nation that ignores their past and their future. If it slips from beneath your feet, they will sadly return to their slumber. And if you are among those whom Allah has guided, then they too will surely follow His guidance. And that sums it up, my brother. And salamu alaikum.